Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the Cynical Challenge podcast. My name is Grayson Kadutz. So glad you could take time to watch us here. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta. We're recording on a Sunday, I guess early afternoon, trying to squeeze this one in. I know people got stuff to do today. Jeff Salisbury is on the line from Saskatoon, and he's got a little trinket to show off. Sally, what you got there?
Yeah, look what showed up. It's my my replica CPL match ball. Here, we'll do it like old school SCTV style. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Like that. And thank you for not showing the brand, because they don't sponsor us. So we don't show their brand yet until they start giving us money.
So enough of that.
JP, Jeff Paulus, is in St. Albert. He's on the line. Podcast extraordinaire. You are, JP. You're popping up all over the place now.
It's actually unbelievable. You know what? For an introvert, I spend a lot of time on air. It's crazy.
You're perfect for the pandemic podcast era then.
Well, podcast, not vodcast, because people are seeing this way too much on TV. And I apologize. I apologize to every one of you looking at me.
Oh, it's good stuff. You're doing a great job. Spread the word of the Cynical Challenge all over the place. So we appreciate that for sure. Not a lot of... Yeah, go ahead, Sally. What's up?
Yeah, right before we bust into the actual footy chat, as two Saskatchewan boys, we'd be remiss not to mention right now that Telemiracle's happening right now. Hey?
I'm seeing the tweets. I know it's different this year. Everything has to be virtual, but it's funny because I didn't appreciate it as a kid. When we had Farmer Vision as a kid, only the two channels, CBC and CTV, that's what ran for the 36 hours on the weekend. And as a 7-8-year-old kid, like, you're like, where's my cartoons? Where's something to watch? No, it's just all these people, and you didn't get it. And then as you grow older and realize what they're doing, you appreciate it a lot more. So good on to see them continue to do that. And they're over $3 million, at least at last check. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think so. My sister-in-law's dad is one of the guys that started it. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know about
98% of our country. But go ahead.
It's just a big fundraiser in Saskatchewan. Sally, why don't you explain it a little bit, since I guess you know a guy who was in the beginning.
Yeah. So the Kinsman Club of I want to say it was Saskatoon initially, but it's all the Kinsman clubs across the province get together and run Telemiracle, which is a telethon. So a call-in charitable donation system where, for 36 hours they have entertainers on, and it goes between Saskatoon or Regina, depending where it's being hosted that year. And CTV for sure just has it running for the entire 36 hours straight. It goes overnight. Like, it just, once it starts, it doesn't stop until the very end. And it's the classic where they have the big numbers board in the background where they put up the big numbers placards for what the newest donation numbers are. And it is part of Saskatchewan's heritage at this point. Like, it is an absolute provincial institution. So we had to say something about it.
It's good. Yeah, I know people who have, taken the shift, at 4 a.m. to answer phones. And there's a little ticker at the bottom. You can see everyone who's donated and how much they want. Like, half the fun, I think, is just like watching the bottom to see, oh, I know so-and-so, or I know someone from that place. So
yeah, for sure.
Hey, where does the money go?
Hospitals.
Hospitals. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah, mainly
great.
Hospitals. And then they also have programs where specific individuals can apply. So that they have a common pool that specific individuals, generally either mental or physical disabilities, are able to apply to get, for instance, like specialized wheelchair equipment that they might need, or specialized equipment for a vehicle. So it kind of acts as a bit of a grant system as well. And I think, like, I remember back in the early 90s when they were just kind of cracking 1 million every time they ran it. And now I think for Telemiracle to be less than 4 million is shocking at this point. I think it's regularly cracking 4. I think last year they cracked 5 million for the first time. So
yeah, no, it's awesome. And in Saskatchewan, really we love a telethon. It saved the riders, and if we do this as well. So anyways,
that's right.
Maybe we need to do that for the Saskatchewan CPL club. I'll have to convince
you. Might be the only way it gets off the ground.
Right.
So there's some Saskatchewan history for those of you who who don't know a lot about Saskatchewan. Now let's talk Canadian Premier League. Not a lot of news this week. There was a couple of re-signings. Paulo Sabak is back with Forge, so that's good for them. Pacific signed a young Italian-Canadian, Matteo Polisi, who played at Simon Fraser, who is part of the NCAA and not in the U Sports part of the world. Maybe the biggest things coming out of Ottawa. First, Malik Hamilton, who played for Cavalry and then went to Atletico, is signing with the Carolina Railhawks, or North Carolina FC is what they're known as now. Shout out to the old NASL days, in League One of USL, so the second tier of USL. And then they also released 8 players. Karuma is gone, and their first signing and captain Ben Fisk was also shown the door as well. So interesting moves coming out of the nation's capital. Sally, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, there's already rumor circulating mainly through the Facebook fan groups and the CPL Discord that Fisk is going to be signing with Forge, which would be quite interesting. I think he actually would fit Forge pretty well. He's that type of possession player that Forge likes to have in their midfield. So, I mean, that would just bolster an already strong squad. So, yeah, and why wouldn't, honestly, if you're a guy like Fisk, why wouldn't you want to head over to a club like Forge right now to likely win a championship? And you'll probably have some MLS eyes on you if you're getting to play in the Voyageurs Cup final, which we'd have to assume is going to be either end of March or beginning of April. So big move. And then you mentioned Polisi, which is an interesting signing. He's really being talked up. They're really excited to have him signing out there. So I think he'll be a player to watch out west. So
yeah, JP, the Hamilton move and the Fisk move in particular raised some flags for you, didn't they?
Yeah, it does. I mean, well, for Hamilton, if they sign Ben Fisk for both parties, great signing for both. I think Fisk fits in there. You look at the amount of senior Canadians available to sign in the CPL right now, and he's at the top of your list of senior Canadian players with good experiences that plays at a very, very high level compared to the, on the average of all the Canadians in this league. He's at that upper tier for me. And now you put him on the best team in the league with the deepest roster, and it just adds to that. So that could be great for both parties. But, when you see Malik leave and go down to a USL 2 team, which is not their highest level, it's below USL Championship. And while USL Championship is very, very high level, especially the top half of that table would be teams that would be very difficult, for us to compete with in the CPL over a full season. Maybe not so much the second level. I see that the CPL is higher than that level. So that's a bit concerning that a young player really just about to break through as far as his development goes and kind of putting his stamp on the game. He's right at that kind of that tipping point now where he's going to probably start to shoot up, and he's left the league. And then you see basically 8 players gone. A few of those, some Canadian players that are off their list now. There's not many Canadian players available out there. I don't know how they replace 8 right now with the same depth. But Ben being the biggest concern for me, because again, he's a team captain. He's a leader of that club, wears his heart in his sleeve. I thought he defined Ottawa, I have to say, in PEI, the way he played, the way he took a leadership role. It's concerning to me for many reasons. Again, there's all the money chat before. I won't get into the money chat. I know the money side of the game. I know the budgets. I know where the money is spent. So I won't talk about what other teams do with their salary caps. There is some falsehoods out there, by the way. I will say that the majority of teams in this league do spend to their cap limit. Absolutely false. Some of those rumors that they don't. The majority of the teams do spend to the cap limit. So I'd like to actually make that a statement for everybody to understand. But still concerning it. But on the other part, then is again, you've got, again, the four international rule. Is that impacting Canadians? We're here, we see a team that's got rid of a whole lot all at once. And is the four international rule impacting Canadian players in this league? That's going to be the question going forward. The rationale of, how many international players last year when it was 2 that had to sign in the league? How many international players didn't make it to PEI because of COVID and travel restrictions? So 2021 is no different as far as I understand, we're still impacted by COVID travel restrictions, things like this, and yet we double the international rule to 4. So does that mean now that every team loses out on 4 players who can't get in the country in a season because of COVID? It's just, yeah, I'm not a fan of it. And again, we're going to see teams that are going to be missing players because of the travel restrictions, probably.
Yeah, I mean, you have to wonder how many of the team managers are truly on board with the upping of the international player rule, because yeah, you're probably handicapping some of the teams. I mean, the ones that are lucky enough to get their internationals in, it'll be probably a massive advantage for them throughout the season. And then look at York. I mean, look at York United. Their entire midfield and front three now are all internationals. All 7 of their players are either midfielders or strikers or wingers. And if they run into any issues bringing players in due to COVID restrictions, that'll totally destroy their season. I mean, they won't be able to compete. And kind of along the lines of talking about COVID restrictions too, is you guys saw that article that came out with the interview with Jeff Hunt, where he was talking about how they're basically facing the situation now where the league isn't going to want to run unless they're able to have bums in seats, which makes sense because where's the money going to come from, really? It could potentially take away a season and take away another year of development for players. So
it's interesting you say like people in seats. I read a rumor today. I don't know how credible it is, but the Edmonton Oilers are actually looking at applying to AHS, Alberta Health, to get some fans in seats by April, and this would kind of be a test that I guess a lot of other leagues and teams would look at in terms of protocols and that kind of things for systems they would use to get fans in seats. I mean, if you look at the United States, we've seen, look how full the Super Bowl was. I mean, yeah, it's outside, so you should be okay. The coronavirus dissipates quickly in the air. The sun helps to destroy the virus or whatever it is that kind of gets exposed, those droplets. So I think outdoor sports should be fine. I mean, if watching the Jays spring training today, the Yankees spring training complex at 25% capacity today. So people are outside, and I haven't seen a lot of studies saying that outdoor sporting events have caused a lot of spread. And I think there's a way to do it. And so hopefully, whether it's through this Oilers thing or whether it's through looking at what some of the American teams in different sports have done, I think there's a way to do it safely. And I think that CPL should be exploring every possible option. And CFL too, when you think of Canadian leagues that really need to survive here through another year. But
yeah.
Anyways, that's some Canadian Premier League talk. We wanted to focus most of this episode on the women's national team. They just wrapped up the SheBelieves Cup on this past Thursday. We had a couple chances to think about it, sit on it for a couple days. Let's kind of go match by match. The American match, the first one, we mentioned it off the top of the last episode. There was a lot of positivity coming out of that match. The only goal they conceded was off a free kick late in the second half that didn't need to be foul, so a mistake there that wound up costing them. But there were a lot of positives. Sally, we'll start with you from that American game in particular.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on that US game, I think it is 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So the 6 of one is that we really put on a defensive masterclass for 99% of that match, besides the one little breakdown that led to their goal. And the half dozen of the other is that the US looked rusty, very rusty. They did not look like a world dominating team like they normally look like. Well, for one thing, they didn't start what I would call their 1A squad. They didn't start their top 11. So once they brought in Morgan and I wish I would have taken a look again at all the subs
too. They had a triple sub
on.
that was like those 3 players would have started like for any other country, but anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, once those 3 came on, all of a sudden that match definitely started to switch over to being way more heavily in the US's favor. But I mean, at the same time, they still weren't really able to take advantage of any of their opportunities. The US, I mean, in this case. And then for Canada, my goodness, we sorely lack an X factor up top. We just do not have a natural finisher, it seems, in our pool of players at this point, because Janine Becky, I just feel that she has regressed over the last couple of years. She has lost that finishing edge that she had when she first showed up for the gals. But yeah, and then Nichelle Prince and Deanne Rose. I mean, somebody needs to just take them to finishing school for a couple of weeks and just focus on nothing but that. Because I can't believe how many opportunities we absolutely squandered. I mean, it was so frustrating watching. And we could have been 2 or even maybe 3-0 up at half if we had actually finished our opportunities in that first half. It could have been 2 or 3-0 Canada. And in the end, it was 1-0 US. So there's not really much more to say about that game, in my opinion.
I actually like Becky out wide. She was swinging in a lot of balls, particularly in the last 2 matches. So I don't necessarily see her as someone up front, but when you get a chance like the one she had, what was it, like the 15th minute or something, it fell right to her feet. You have to bury that. And then, Nichelle Prince, there was a lot of unselfishness that I saw, like Prince cutting it back that one time when she was basically in, she should have had a go. JP, I think the biggest thing for Canada there is it was a solid positive start under Bev, her first game, and they threw a formation at the United States that I don't think the Americans were expecting.
I think you're seeing the evolution here in the very first game under Bev Friesen. I think you're going to see, I think you saw where she wants to take the team, how they want to play football. And they tried. And I think the biggest takeaway from that is that they tried to play football. You know, it wasn't kind of the, you know, what we've come to expect from Canada on the women's side over the last several years. It's building out of the back. You know, and we saw some of these mistakes against Brazil and trying to play to the back, but they're trying to play to the back. These mistakes are going to happen. But that this game was it was encouraging for me, I have to say, because of the way they tried to play against the best team on the planet on the female side of the game. So they wanted to play against them. You know, they showed no fear. Players getting opportunities. You know, we're starting to see some of these the new young ones. Gilles. Yeah. I mean, what a performance in that one. So, and then of course we lose her. You know, for the rest, which made an impact. Bright signs for me. You know, I think this is the way we have to go, and to take it one little step further. And this will be, you know, I'll probably get hammered for this comment, but going forward, playing the type of football that we saw that game that, you know, obviously Bev wants to bring in is, what do you do with Christine Sinclair going forward into the Olympics? So what's a priority? Is Olympics a priority, or is the World Cup a priority after that? And do you use the Olympics as a way to really prepare a group of players, the next generation of players, for the World Cup? So these are the questions I think that Bev has to answer. But it'll be interesting seeing how Sinclair fits into this style of play.
And I think we'll talk about kind of the future here in a little bit. Okay. But there's a good little prelude to it. The Argentina match was next. Canada wins 1-0 on a stoppage time, last gasp kind of winner from Sarah Stratigakis, her first goal with the ladies. That was a frustrating one to watch for me. Argentina didn't really seem interested in playing. So they kind of just sat back, everybody in a low block type of thing. Canada just couldn't break it down. I think the one thing that was annoying for me is that Canada's going to see that when they come into whether it's World Cup qualifying and Olympic qualifying. Obviously, they're in the Olympics this year, but when they play some of the teams that are rated lower, like Argentina, who are on the rise, you can see they've got some players who are trying to play. But when they play some of those lower teams, how do you break down that low block? And they struggled, and finally off a free kick that Becky put in, they were able to get it. Give Evelyn Viennes a lot of credit for getting the touch to get it forward. But what did you guys make of the Argentina game? 1-0 win, but you know, maybe it should have been better.
Jeff?
Yeah. I think that it was a good game for the younger crop of players to experience coming up against a side that isn't able to match your quality. So they essentially play Mourinho ball and park the bus. And I mean, good on the ladies in the end and managing to get the winner. Again, I think we squandered more chances than we should have because we are lacking that. That for me, that was the ultimate theme of this tournament for us, is that we're just lacking that X factor finisher. That maybe that's still where Christine Sinclair slots in. But yeah, we didn't give up any really bad opportunities for Argentina, which was a major plus. I felt that we played a very composed game, and I think if we are just able to start taking advantage of opportunities better, that game probably would have ended up 3 or 4-0 instead of only 1-0, because we still struggle so much at scoring. I'm sorry, I'm so frustrated with that team right now with how much we struggle at scoring, and what a frightening sign that is for the future at the moment, that we just don't have that natural finisher at this point, it seems. So but good on Argentina. I mean, they played their system almost perfectly against us. Like, they really were playing for at least the 0-0, or maybe if they got lucky on a set piece to nick one on us. And that didn't really come for them anyway. It was never really a threat for us. Which, again, kudos to the girls for defending intelligently and avoiding that potential pitfall. So
I think
Yeah.
Argentina, just before you jump in here, JP, they gave up 4 to Brazil in their first match. So I would imagine that the mindset would have been kind of pounded home by the coaches. JP, I can't remember if you said you were able to watch that match or not, but did you have any thoughts on the match against Argentina?
No, the only real thoughts, I mean, I actually happen to be an expert on not scoring goals. So the only thing I'll leave known, I couldn't watch that game in full. It's just been a really busy week for me. What I will say, though, is for me, it goes so outside of the event itself, we get so caught up in where Canada sits in the rankings. And I think that would be a mistake for Bev to come in here right off the bat and look at the rankings and see that as the most important goal to come out of this cup event. And so this gave her a great chance again to work on these things. That was 90 minutes of getting to work against a team in a low block. And if we look at it that way, as that part of the exercise, and how do we define that next finisher, Jeff? Who's going to replace Christine Sinclair going forward? Well, what a great chance for 9 minutes to do it against real opposition with some of your players coming up that are going to have to now fill the void when Christine eventually steps away. So I see it as development for the team, and as a real positive that Argentina did that. And well done to Argentina, because they have to, they also went in with that game plan and really executed, is my understanding. That's all I really have to say about
it. The final game was the one that I always looked at as the most important. The rankings are what they are, take them for what they're worth with a grain of salt, but Brazil and Canada were both tied for 8th. You kind of expected them to give the US a tough game, but probably come up short, and you expected them to beat Argentina. Brazil was the real measuring stick, and it didn't go well. Like you said, JP, they were trying to play, and there was mistakes. Jade Rose, center back, who was starting, I think she had her 3rd cap. She's 21, turns the ball over, and Brazil scores the opening goal. The second goal was just a cluster in the box. Just hammer that thing into Rose's head, get it out of there, and deal with the throw. But again, there was a lack of finishing and a couple errors. And once Brazil got up 2, you kind of thought it was over. And they were up to, I can't even remember, 25 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, but, it was early on.
Yeah.
Kudos
to Brazil. Man, they play nice football. Obviously, Brazil, you would expect that from them. But it feels like that's a Brazil team, as an aside, that is kind of at the end of a really nice era for them. The Martas, the Formigas, the players like that are kind of nearing the end of the career. They have to bring in some younger players, so we might see a shift from them. But Jeff, Salisbury, let's go to you. This was a tough one to swallow at the end of the day, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, to look at it, I mean, to use the excuse to kind of get past it of how we were lacking a lot of our top 11 players. And Gilles had gone back to France. So basically our best player of the tournament was gone after that first game against the States. boy, could we have used her.
Yeah.
Holy moly. There was some real ugly defending that happened in that game. Like we looked panicky at large swaths of the game. We did not look comfortable. And that I know you say that Brazil is maybe kind of at the end of that one cycle of having your Martas and Formigas, but at the same time, they have very, very successfully moved into a new era. And I would actually argue that they are fully in that new era because Formiga wasn't even there. And Marta doesn't really, I mean, Marta is just, she has so much experience that she's kind of able to command things on the pitch. And that's really great to have for the younger players. But they still would have performed just as well as they did if she hadn't been on the pitch. It wasn't really about her at all, that match. So, I mean, at this point, Brazil is at the point beyond where we're at. We're still at what do we do with Christine? Brazil has gotten past what do we do with Marta, and they have now hit we have a new crop of players that are potentially going to be even better than that last generation, which is crazy. I think we're going to see Brazil as a top 3 nation in women's football by the next World Cup. I think that's their trajectory. They're going to be challenging the US, Germany, and Japan, and probably England for one of those top 3 spots. That's the quality that I saw from them in that match. I mean, we just did not stack up against them in the end. It was kind of saddening to see. I think that still is a match that should still be setting off some alarm bells that we just don't have the player pool yet to support that next transition. I guess that's really it. We don't have the player pool yet to support that post-Christine era transition. And that's very worrisome, pardon me.
Yeah. A lot of Canada's best chances actually came off the goalkeeper, Barbara. She just gave the ball away, 3 or 4 times? And we just couldn't do anything with it. And then late in the second half, maybe 65th, 70th minute on, we had the majority of possession, but a lot of that's just score effect. Brazil kind of sitting back trying to defend. JP, maybe your thoughts on that final match, and those alarm bells that I think should be going off.
This is the match that set off alarm bells for me, and it did that because, again, we look at the players that weren't available for Canada, but those players are not going to be available for Canada, many of them. Again, we start thinking of the next World Cup. So what's the next generation of player coming up? And I think that this is the game that for me showed that maybe we have fallen a bit behind, what's happening out there, because fair play to every one of the girls. I'm not criticizing them at all, the players on the team. Everyone is a wonderful player, but you look at where we're at then as a nation. That game for me is a question of where we are as a nation in our player development on the female side of the game. That's the indicator for it. That's what I take from that, Grayson, is more of what's going on, what's been happening the last 10 years, 5 years in player development here. Why are we not keeping up when this country is one of the countries that really established the women's game and women's football, committing money into it and whatnot outside of a professional game, but really with resources and stuff. And for many years, even today, maybe changing because of Alfonso Davies, Jonathan David, and what John Herbin's brought to the men's team. But for many years, they carried the national flag for this country over the men's game. It was the women's game that put us on the map in football. And so it's a bit disappointing maybe to see that, or to feel that we're falling a bit behind at the moment with the next generation coming in.
Yeah.
3 quick points before I forget them. The first one, I just want to reinforce what you just said there, Jeff. And a very quick story. So a new guy started at work, and he played youth soccer here in Saskatoon for years, but hasn't really done anything with the game since. But I mean, he's aware of what's happening kind of with the Canadian soccer program, right? And to him, it's still the men's side sucks and the women's side is the only thing that's good. And that mentality, I think, is still kind of hurting us. Isn't maybe the right word, but the perception of the general public is still very much on the men's side suck. The women's side is the only thing we have going that's good. And that kind of, I think, is hurting us a little bit from within. And I think that might be affecting a bit how player development goes on the women's side, where enough people still don't think that things maybe are kind of going wrong. And man, the second point is we need that professional women's league so badly. My God, like think of what a player like Jade Rose, another player, Deanne Rose, how some of the other younger girls that were on the squad, sorry, names are eluding me right now, but that generation of players, they've been robbed of an entire developmental level to really get them to be what I would say a world-class player playing on a national team. And it shows. I just felt that we did not stack up compared to that Brazilian team, player to player. We just didn't stack up. So something needs to happen with a professional league for the women in this country, and it needs to happen yesterday.
Yeah.
And last thought really quick, and back to talking about Barbara, that is the one thing that I think is missing for Brazil, for them becoming that top 3 nation in the women's game, is a top keeper. Barbara isn't good enough. They don't have a keeper in their pool that is good enough at this point. If they could unearth a world-class women's keeper for their country, they would definitely be top 3, because that is the only thing that they are lacking at this point.
Nobody in Brazil dreams of being a goalkeeper though when they grow up, that's for sure.
Right.
I just wanted to point out, Sally, further your thought. A lot of these players, Evelyn Viennes, Nichelle Prince, those types of players, they developed in the NCAA. Like, we can't rely on the NCAA to develop players for us. That's just it's not good enough, to be honest. And I guess, as we've talked about Christine a few times here, what is she now? Late 30s. I think by the time the next World Cup comes in 2023, I think she'll be 40 years old. And they say a superstar player can glaze over a lot of problems. Is that what we've seen here? Is that Christine Sinclair has been so good, she'll get the 1 goal a game, the 2 goals a game that Canada needs to get victories, that it's just kind of, everything else just kind of gets bypassed. Is that's what happened here? And now we're starting to see that when she's not around and she's at the twilight of her career, things are starting to fall apart.
Yep. I think you just hit the nail on the head. That's exactly how I've looked at it. She still is our X factor. She is still that player that when she's on the field, we can score. And that is the number one thing that we lack in our game, is that ability to score. And I mean, think of some of the timely goals that she has scored for us. I always want to start by looking at that goal against the Chinese in the World Cup, but it was a penalty. So really any of the gals on the field could have done that, but still it was her. And we knew when she stepped up to take that pen that it was going in. Like, there was no question that wasn't going in. It was going in for sure. Think of the goals, some of the absolute highlight reel goals that she scored for us. Maybe not in big games, like that one against Costa Rica that went bar down and in. That was ridiculous. But then there are some massive goals that she scored that ultimately were in a losing performance, like that free kick against Germany.
2017 World Cup.
When she had the face, when she had the face mask on. I mean, that was a highlight goal any day of the week. It was ridiculous what a free kick that was. So, yeah, I mean, we are in big trouble. We are in big trouble. And the number one thing is we lack that professional league. And without having that league where our girls can develop into potential world-class players, we're just going to keep sliding on down the rankings and nothing's going to stop it. No coach in the world is going to be able to prevent that. You could bring Pep Guardiola in and it wouldn't make a difference because we can't score.
That's the interesting take for me is the pro league part. And I mean, professional clubs develop players, federations don't. In Canada, the federation has no choice but to try to develop our female players because there's no professional clubs. So they've tried to do this through the Rex program. And listen, they've made great efforts. I have to say, they've committed some finances to it. They've made great efforts at the Rex level to develop players. The Whitecaps consistently have committed to the female game as far as funding it, the Super Rex program there. So there's individuals trying. The government, the Canadian Soccer Association is trying, but again, without what you've said, Jeff, the infrastructure of professional league for these players, there's a few clubs, Foothills, UWS, now St. Albert, UWS. There's a couple clubs that are trying to do their small part into developing players, and it's commendable. It's fantastic what they're doing, the commitment they made, but if we have one or two professional clubs playing in an American league, how is that developing players throughout the entire country to grow the player pool? They're affecting 40 players. Yeah, and both teams out of Alberta, and they're affecting 40 players. We've got no commitment yet from TFC or Montreal Impact on the female side of the game. The CPL clubs as of yet, but it's a new league. We can't hold that against the CPL at this moment in time. They still have to get their finances in order on the men's side. But the next step, though, is something domestic. We need a league, whatever level we start at, but these young athletes need to be playing with clubs who are focused on their development only. You're right. University football down at NCAA is not interested in developing Canadian professional players for our senior national team. They're interested in winning a national title for their school. Bit different. So this is the issue.
So I guess the big question, and it's probably one that doesn't even really have an answer, how do we do it? You can't just start up a league. Like, it's not, super easy. And obviously the cries are for the Canadian Premier League teams and owners to pony up and say, listen, if you have an FC Edmonton, if you have a Valor, if you have a Forge, you should have FC Edmonton women, Valor women, Forge women. But at the same time, those owners, how many thousands, millions of dollars have they invested and lost in the Canadian Premier League as is? Really, the league is floating on that Media Pro deal right now because of the pandemic. The pandemic has changed things, obviously. But I think if you go to new investors, particularly, let's say you want to put an expansion team in Saskatoon, if you want to put an expansion team in Quebec City, and you put on the little, thing at the end of the contract that says, oh yeah, you also have to invest in a women's team at some point when, we get that going. I think a lot of potential investors would balk. I think they just say, no, we're already sinking money and losing it into a men's professional team. How many more millions and millions of dollars are we going to lose by investing in a women's team? So I guess the big thing is how do we go about this? What do we do? Sally, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, to me, the first step, I think, is essentially having a women's pro league summit. Bring together the ownership groups of all of the pro clubs and semi-pro clubs in the country, with the specific agenda being, let's talk about a women's pro league, and at least, the solution doesn't have to come out of that. However, the conversation has to be started. At least to me, the conversation hasn't even been started. We just lost Car Moscato to the Bahamas. I mean, again, good on her. Yeah. But she one of the things she was tasked with was looking into sort of getting the train moving on the track of a women's pro league, and now she's gone. And like, and this is not meant as a criticism of her or anything, but what was actually accomplished while she was in that role? Because I've never seen anything. I mean, she would go on Twitter and have conversations with people on Twitter, and do some interviews. I think she did the one with CBC. But aside from that, I haven't really ever seen anything materialize from what she was doing. So I don't really know where things are even at. So to me, we're still at the absolute we're below foundation at this point. There is no foundation. That there needs to be a summit, bringing together those professional and semi-professional club owners to be in the same space, to just talk about that elephant in the room. What do we do about a women's pro league? Because it is needed. And then from there, depending on what the reaction is from those owners, I think you're probably going to have to start looking into the female, the female entrepreneur part of Canada, if you will. So we're gonna have to start looking at who are the female leaders in the corporate world in Canada that maybe we can start having conversations with, and seeing if we can draw interest. Because I really don't feel you're going to get it if you approach men. I just don't think you're going to get it. And I mean, it's a very pessimistic view. I mean, I'm bringing the cynical back into the cynical challenge. I'm sorry, but I think, man, it is such a steep, it's damn near vertical. I mean, it's just off of vertical when you're looking at this cliff, is how ridiculously steep it is. But the conversation just needs to be started.
Yeah.
JP, what are your thoughts?
Change the model. That's my thoughts. You look at the CPL right now, and I've heard figures of if owners in the CPL want to break even, they're going to need about 6,000 to 7,000 fans per game in their stadiums. Really tough for Clark. It has 4,500. Yeah. But so if those are the numbers showing about that, but why do they need numbers that way to break even? What is it about what forces that type of revenue generation from ticket sales that? So one of the biggest things is travel. One of the biggest expenses for any, whether it's CFL or CPL, one of the biggest issues in this country is the size of the country and the fact that our airlines simply charge too much money for a flight. You can fly to England cheaper than you can fly to Halifax. So this is the biggest issue. So change the model of what a pro league has to look like. It doesn't need to be coast to coast. Regionalize it. Have a regional league. Maybe then grow that to a national league where maybe the conference winners get together for a national championship to elicit that excitement across the country. But regionalize it first, keep costs down, bus to Calgary, bus to Saskatoon for a game. These are ways we can maintain costs. And if that happens, then the number of people that need to come to games to break even for an owner substantially drops. Yes, there has to be some wages in consideration initially as leagues start off. But that's the way you can make a change. You cannot rely on sponsorship to make a league survive. If that's a league's business model, it's probably not going to work. So there's a combination of the two. But again, for me, that's exactly it.
I know we hate this as Canadians, having to rely on American leagues, but do you guys think a national women's soccer league team, so NWSL, top tier in the States, do you think a team in Toronto or Vancouver would be a good placeholder for something like that, at least for now? And how quickly should that happen?
Go ahead, Jeff. I've started every other time. It's you.
No, listen, I was going to, as long as there's something underneath it, I think a standalone NWSL team in one location is not good enough. It's great for 20 players, 20 to 30 players. But unless there's something below that where their reserve team can play in, where there's another level where a lot of these, young athletes are now have that goal of being on that NWSL team. Maybe there's 2 or 3 in the country. Even them as standalones, still not enough, not developing enough players. We need that base underneath the highest level to create players to get to the highest level. And why even NWSL? I mean, there's no surprise. When you look at the emergence of England as far as the women's national team is tied directly to the emergence of the Women's Premier League, the growth of that professional league there. Same in France, the women's professional game in France. So this is what we need in the country. We need that next tier. So NWSL would be fantastic, supported 100%, as long as we have a base, something underneath it that's domestic.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree that we need those tier 3, I'll call them, leagues like League One Ontario and the PLSQ to happen in every region. BC is hopefully going to be getting BC League One up and running, both men's and women's. And then we need one for the Prairies and we need one for the Atlantic region. And if we can have that, then all of a sudden, I think you're going to see that overall level of play of players going up. And then the last missing piece is going to be having that professional league, however it looks. And sure, I don't care how it looks as long as it is fully professional. If it means that it's broken into an East and West to try and keep costs down, so you don't have a Halifax flying out to Vancouver Island. Rather, the furthest trip would maybe be Winnipeg out to Vancouver Island, which is still a beastly excursion. But you need both. You need that layer beneath that League One Ontario, PLSQ, BC League One type layer to be able to bring that overall level of play competency up. And then you need that professional tier at the very top to allow us to start generating those world class players that, either they go right to the national team from that league, or maybe that's where the real cream of the crop emerge, and they start finding spots in the NWSL in France and England and Germany. And that's kind of our model of developing players, to be basically more of like a female player export country rather than just creating everything from within. So, but yeah, again, to me, it's all about having that first conversation. We just need to talk about it. It doesn't seem that anybody in a position that could actually do anything about it is really willing to talk about it at this point. Everybody's just happy to kind of leave it over on the side and just purely focus on the men's game.
Yeah, and I think once you start creating some of those other leagues, you're going to generate more eyes on more talent. Again, we talked about it before. Cast the net wider. It's got to be outside Vancouver. It's got to be outside Toronto. Yeah. There are players all across this country, and again, the more opportunities they have, the more chances there are for them to be discovered and for them to develop. So interesting times in the women's game. It feels like we were kind of here and we've slumped down and we're kind of at the bottom. Now we've got to figure out a way to get back up. The women will play a friendly against England in April in preparation for the Olympics, which is coming up pretty quick. So, but fellas, go ahead.
Last quick thought I just want to say is I think we might have to accept the fact that we're going to actually have to not just bottom out here, but we're maybe going to have to bottom out way down here. And what I mean by that is if bottoming out here means we might just stay kind of status quo and hope that we go back up, or we may just stay. Whereas if we kind of start working on that system, and that might see, we start off developing that tier 3 system across the country, we won't be developing players that are up to this echelon. We'll only be developing players maybe that are up to here. So we'll bottom out a little bit lower, but it means that our trajectory might we might get a better trajectory out of it, where we'll be able to get back up into that top 6, top 5 conversation. Sometimes you just have to take a bit of pain before you can get the gain, right?
Right. Well, it's got to start somewhere, right? And now is needed. So hopefully those in power will be able to work on something. But fellas, I think we've reached our time limit here. So just quickly whip around. JP, start with you. Where can we find you online? Then Sally, you're up.
I am Jeff_Paulus, only on Twitter.
And you can find me at Jeff D. Salisbury on Twitter. And then you can also find me commenting all the time at the various CPL fan groups on Facebook, as well as the Voyageurs group on Facebook, and then on even the CPL Discord. I like kind of being everywhere, seeing what everybody's talking about. So
you just like to take all your hot takes and put them in as many places as you possibly can.
That's it.
And I am at Grayson Knutson. You can find me on Twitter, and you can find the vodcast at the Cynical Chow 1 on Twitter, and you can search it up on YouTube as well. Give us a follow, and find the podcast on all your favorite catchers, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the like. And hey, don't be afraid to give us a comment. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think, what you agree with, what you disagree with, what you think we should talk about. But yeah, always happy to hear from everyone. And fellas, I'm always happy to hear from both of you, and I look forward to chatting with you guys again real soon.
Have a great day.
Have a good one.